So the emitter is the thing that actually creates all of the bursts, which creates all of the particles. So we have all of our active bursts, since the emitter creates the bursts. It's also important to note that the emitter is a drawable and an alarmable. It's not a full game object, just these two. We have our current rotation, position, velocity. We have a pointer to the particle effect, because again, it acts like a database, but we copy over some of the values so that we don't have to constantly ping it for information. These are ones that we're using quite frequently. Here we have a few functions. We have the classic overrides, we have a register, we have spawn burst or stop spawning, in case the user wants to create a burst immediately, like at a certain point, or just stop everything completely. We have set functions for the rotation, position, and velocity, or change info, which just adds on the current information. Going into the CPP file, we have the emitter and the constructor and the set are basically identical. You can create an empty emitter. We just give it garbage values, or not garbage, but null values mostly. Register, it's just to submit draw registration. And then within the draw 2D, this is where all of the magic happens. First, we call all the bursts that are out of time so that we don't have to do fancy iterator shenanigans later. This is just so that we know everything within our list is a burst that is alive and needs to be drawn. Then we make sure, then we check, okay, after we called that all, is it empty and do we need to die? If we do, then we just kill ourselves. Otherwise, we do this fancy GL stuff, go through all of the bursts and tell them to draw themselves, which draw all the particles, and once that's all done, we turn everything off. We have a simple alarm which notifies ourselves, hey, it's time to start being ready to not live anymore. And then alarm 1, which simply spawns a new burst, and then sets ourselves for another sets the alarm for another time when we need to spawn another burst, which all of the math for that is handled right here. And then we just have some set functions at the bottom. So that's the emitter. The particle system, moving up one, the particle effect, again, is the database. Particle system is a group of particle effects. So this is basically multiple particle effects working in conjunction with one another. So if you wanted to have an explosion, you could have smoke, a bit of fire, some dirt spraying out. The particle system is how you would set that all up. So we have a simple struct, effects data, which has a particle effect and a start delay. Basically, it's just how long does this have to, in a normal scenario, how long does this happen after start is called. Then we have our private, which is just, we have all of our effects, all of the emitters, so that we can tell them to stop if we need to. Some iterator stuff. And then we have a particle system timer, which is just a way for the particle system to have a game object so that it can be notified about time passing. Since we have the start delay, we need some way to keep track of time, which is what the particle system timer does. It's an updatable, and that's all it does. Set timer. When we're done with it, we tell it that we're done, which just kills itself. And then once time has elapsed, it just pings the particle system. Rotation and position, which is just the base value for what all of the particle effects will be spawned at. And then going into the publics, we have set, we have add, and we have start. The start just starts the sequence of events. We can force start certain particle effects, or we can force start all of them. and then we have stop all as well, and we can get all of the active emitters for this certain particle system in case we need to do something fancy. So that's the particle system, and we'll see it in action when we're actually running the game. But before we go much further, the final thing for the particle system is a particle effect manager. This is a particle effect manager, not a particle system manager. So if you want to create particle systems, sadly, the user has to do that every time, quote unquote. There's no way to store particle systems, but since particle systems are just collections of particle effects, it's not too big of a deal, I think. The reason I didn't want to have particle systems saved is one, because it has a game object associated with it, and two, because the particle system, multiple particle systems might have the same particle effect. And when I have to delete a particle system, I would have to go through all of the effects and check to make sure that it's not deleted already. And I don't want to do that, and that just sounds like bad practice. So the particle effect gets saved instead. But other than that, the particle effect manager is very straightforward. It's like every other manager that we've made. It has a map, it has a key, it does all that fancy stuff. The only thing to note is that when we terminate it, we terminate all of the factories for the emitter, bursts, and particle as well. So that is the particle effect manager. That's my particle system generally. Yeah.